Yo no 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 yo do do no yo do do yo do 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 yo yo do do yo do 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 yo do 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 yo do 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 do. No 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 no. Yo no 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 no. Yo no 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 no. Yo no no yo no no yo no no yo no yo no. Oh, 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 no, 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 no. Yo no 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 yo no no yo no yo no yo no 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 yo no no yo no 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 no. That is the Hong Kong anthem. Not a nice place. Pretty interesting culture though. I just went outside and watched a rocket launch before I could even hear the sound. It lit up the sky. And it burned holes in my vision. I'm still blinking away. Oh, wow. I am fat and bedded after these 2 feast weeks. So it's meat fair and cheese fair Sunday. And it's the time leading up to Lent when you just completely fast from meat for half of the year, just like the ancient Romans used to do. And also you fast from various things, you make a list of things to fast, and you achieve them. And that's a good penance. But for me, it's gonna be more exercise, less food, less sugar, because I've been eating a lot of honey. So, you know, I'm peak plump right now. Good golly, slap me on the grill. Dom? I've never met a Dom in my life. Everybody acts differently depending on what room they're in. Duh. Alpha? I've never met an alpha in my life. Everybody acts differently depending on what room they're in. And the most alpha person I've ever met, alpha, was somebody that actually was like a second in command of the general area, which is the guy that I was, bunked up with in jail. And he was incredibly nice when you got to know him. So this whole alpha dom culture is just like, it's really nasty. It's played up. It's if you believe in that, just like the Nazis that believe that the Jews are trying to get black people to breed with white people. That's not even like remotely accurate, but if you're porn sick, you'd probably think that. If you're like one of the people on 4chan, you'd probably think stuff like that. And I'm specifically narrowing in on real things that 4chan has done and internet sickened people have observed. When I say that, I'm not throwing 4chan under the bus entirely. But yeah, it's everybody acts differently depending on what room they're in, right? So Zelensky So Zelensky all right, let's get to that later. Guy with faded arm tattoos has melty after feeling slightly disrespected at a local bar. More at 11. Like, for real, man. For real. Like, that's the weakest person in the room. For real. Adam Friedland kind of gives me the ick. He's not terrible, but he kind of gives me the ick. You're not giving Timothy Chalamet, bro. You're not. Wake up, wokester. Alright, enough laughing at my own stupid jokes. I'm not even that funny. Today, anyways. I can be funny sometimes. Would you ever accept on principle the ravings of a man rolling his eyes and shaking his head in disapproval at you? Would you just, a man who cannot control his emotions to the point where he's physically melting down in front of you, would you ever respect that? It'd take a lot of willpower to respect that. I mean, sure, some of you have been stuck in positions where you've been forced to. We'll flip the script, say that, that individual is the one on the receiving end of your benefactory. It's not looking good. Zelensky bros, it's not looking good. Like really, the suffer Cranshaw, suffer Pompeo. For real though. For real though. Now imagine that you, you know, imagine that's the person's boss, but instead of that, how about scratch that? Imagine that's the president of the United States. I'm stealing a point from Charles Carroll from the MDE troop, who I've been a fan of for a long time. But for real, imagine that's the president of the United States and you're having like a melty because you feel slightly disrespected. Very tepid comments, very tepid criticism. But because you have to be the dom in the room, you gotta curse under your breath and call the guy a bitch. Not that's not what it means to like dominate what? Like if you can't dominate your own emotions, what the hell? What do you think you're doing? Oh, because you can like flash floodlights in somebody's face or make a raucous amount of horrific noise and make people flinch a little bit when they're caught unawares. You can make people suffer, and that's why you consider yourself a dom. Or in this case, in the higher cases, you can march, hundreds of thousands of men off to die, each one at the barrel of another gun. That's what you consider to be a dom when you can't even dominate your own emotions? It's sick, man. It's sick. It is the porn sick terminology. It's a flat terminology, right? Everybody is what they would consider to be a switch, but nobody is simultaneously because it's a faulty paradigm, you see. You gotta get over that. Gotta get over that nasty neoliberal, culturally liberal philosophy. Culturally liberal does not mean accepting of other races. It is a degeneration of your own particular culture. And I I come off as an idiot saying that, but it's true. Like culturally liberal has been lauded in the classical liberal circles, some of which that I have respect for. And what is it? It's accepting of things like pornography. It's accepting of things like pimpery. It's accepting of things like genuinely degenerate cultures. And you can't be accepting of that. You have to be conservative across the board while not being a horrible person. That's apparently tricky for some people, but if you just go out into the woods and you find nice Americans that aren't like exposed to radioactive Hollywood culture on the radio or on the TV, the Amish, for instance, then you will find good conservatism. The Amish are a great example of good, wholesome conservatism. And, like, if there's at least one of you is going, the Amish are bad. If you think that, if any of my audience thinks that, you are probably actually the bad one. You're probably the one with a defunct moral compass, if you think that the Amish are bad. The Amish are one of the vibrant species of American culture that by the will of God has manifested and is now some of our most precious people. Some of the most precious people on the entire planet. Vance exploited the weakness in Zelensky, and I respect him for that a lot. As I said, you can trigger people intelligently, you can trigger people tactically, and you can get what you want. Not this Andrew Tate crap. It is sickening. It is sickening that men like that have been grooming people's children. And Gen X has allowed it, and I hate to say it, the millennial generation has allowed their children to be groomed by people like Andrew Tate because they think, the ones that are having children, they think that money equals power equals success. Those are three different lines of upward trajectory. Three different lines, and they can manifest in different ways. And you can be given as a puppet power and cars and a platform and algorithmic boosts as a puppet of moneyed interests manipulating things behind the scenes, but that doesn't mean that you're successful. Your success is one, not your own, and two, if it's a spiritual drain, like you are completely mentally ill and thinking that you're throwing fireballs in a Romanian prison because you just cannot stop lying, then you're
you're not a you're not an example of a happy and successful person. Straight up. But thanks to Barron, now we have Andrew Tate in our state. Barron is not beating the autistic allegations with that. Like, no siree. If you wanted to beat the autistic allegations, you would have probably stood ahead of grade school mentality because Andrew Tate is cool. Regardless, I won't dwell on that. Waiter! Oh, waiter! More biting flies, please, waiter! I just can't get enough of them. I simply must have more. Oh, waiter! It's unironically true that the shuttering of USAID will be good for our and other governments. Still, screw Malay, screw Musk, screw DeSantis. And I really, truly, deeply mean that in a pragmatic and realistic and scientifically minded way. Also, morally minded way, because sometimes the two don't synthesize very well. Any Zionist puppet that represents an embodiment of that SpongeBob meme where Squidward is pulling the kid close and saying, "We're gonna kill you." That's, that ain't it, Chief. Screw anybody that thinks like that. Like, if Musk isn't stopped from his goals, it will very likely that individuals like Musk, Bill Gates, and the thing is, I can barely say Jeff Bezos, but he's capable. He's got a lot that he could have hiding up his sleeve. But like the genuine decisions of Bill Gates to release herbicide everywhere while storing up seeds in a doomsday vault that you're creating the doomsday for, that could destroy the planet with just one individual. That could destroy the entire human race over a period of time with just one individual's actions. And Musk is joining him in the capability of utter destruction for short-term gain. Those are the only two that I can really think that are lining up already, unless they are stopped to, like, you don't have to hurt them to do this, just stop their plans to destroy humanity as we know it. Not ascend it, not evolve it, not make it better, but to destroy it with absolutely insane horizons in their mind. And once again, Bezos seems pragmatic, seems realistic. He puts stuff on the ground. He employs tons and tons of people. You cannot say the same for Bill Gates or Elon Musk. They squeeze what little employees that they have for maximum resource gain and minimum give back to anybody, including the general economy, general ecosystem, etc., etc. And I like how economy and ecosystem have the same starter because it is genuinely about the grander scheme of things, not individual pinpoint pricks, right? Right? And thank God Trump really genuinely has that sort of like, he does, as I've been saying for a while, I've been praying for a while, and I've seen and I've observed he does have a larger scope. And I hope he catches wind that Elon Musk is a dirty, dirty liar, and that everything that he promises he does not actually reward. The issue is AI providing people with a fancy hologram to indulge in. Now, it's enough of that for now. Oh, and before I cap that off, saying anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism is exactly the same as saying anti-Nazism is racist towards Germans. You see how that doesn't make any sense at all? That's the exact principle that we're having to deal with, unfortunately. Anybody who thinks that, like, strong-arming people with censorship laws in America isn't going to backfire horrendously, they don't know their American culture very well. They think some people are actually happy with gigantic corporations censoring people because they could cherry pick a few people and watch them enjoying the suffering of people that they don't like, but that's not the vast majority of American culture and their ideals. An interesting comparison from Gen X to Gen Y is how millennials tore apart Dan Harmon. Dan Harmon was just, like, he was, first two seasons of Rick and Morty were pretty dang good, I gotta admit. Pretty funny, pretty good. Had a lot in the tank there. Third, fourth, etc. I haven't watched any of the new ones. Fell off super hard. Reason why is because if you look at, like, High on Life, the video game, they're relying on AI and they're relying on endless sex joke to sell their product. And just like Musk, just like any other Gen Xer who is obsessed completely with the concept that sex sells and not the fact that, like, it did for a while, but people are getting, like, dreadfully tired of it. and people want more sweetness and softness and decency and morality and intelligence. My generation does. We have expressed that wholeheartedly. Now, I'm not just speaking for myself or my friends. I'm saying the millennial generation in general, that it fell off real hard. Is the Warhammer 40k Legion, the Iron Hands, related to the Serbian militia, the Black Hand? All jokes aside, we can learn a ton about archetypal evil from its ways from Warhammer 40k. It's peak. It's peak, I'm afraid. A good refutation for random mutation evolutionism is the coelacanth, right? So it's the coelacanth as we know it has been around for like 500 million years without mutations. However, there are mutations that are found in different areas from like, so what you got where the coelacanth came from, stayed stable for 400 million. During the shifting areas, some areas weren't as stable as where it is. During shifting areas, you had a child, say you have parents, they give birth to 6 children. Some of the children are different from others, right? And some of those children will have more favorable traits for at least being more comfortable in particular areas, say the particular area where the family moved, and those will be the happiest, most charismatic, most liable to breed. It's the same concept, and that's exactly how that works. And over time, you modify the genes by doing that. Now, we all know that gene modification is a thing because we look at what they're doing with CRISPR and the horrors that it's probably going to produce down the road. But the fact that people say it's just a random mess that's just constantly shifting and changing like some Lovecraftian horror, that does not align with the beautiful coelacanth that is too stupid to die. Want to know why American English has next to no honorifics? Here's an interesting point. Got past my rambling. Interesting point. So a priest is called a father. A bishop is called your excellency. You could even call the Pope an all-father if you want, although that is improper. What did Victorian culture do? About 400 or so years ago, Anglicanism developed as an ape of the Vatican. Who's the head of the English politics? The Prime Minister, you see. Who was Virginia named after? The Virgin Queen of England, stealing a spotlight from Marian veneration. That's why you have Maryland, which is like a Catholic resonance in that span, and you also have a lot of corruption there as it was pinpointed and targeted by Masons, etc., etc. Like anybody knows anything about DC knows that it's like swamped with Masons, and especially in that stretch of New England down to the Mid-Atlantic, that is just swamped with Masons, and it's a firmly blue democratic slave owner, long-term, like, oh, we don't need chains to own slaves sort of mentality. That's where you get all out of your LBJs. They come from that general area, even though I don't even think LBJ was from that general area. That's the mentality of it, you see. Doesn't mean there's tons of good people in the Mid-Atlantic. I got family in the Mid-Atlantic, and I know that they're good people, but I also can see how it can corrupt you in various ways and make you a little bit less good and put chips in your armor. It can be exploited at weak points in your life. So, keep that in mind. Anyways, back to the point. The Virgin Queen, named after Virginia, was named after the Virgin Queen, stealing a spotlight from Marian veneration, which really kicked off in the Catholic world around 1500. The banning of the Knights Templar and their polyamorous orgy rituals, and the institution of the Virgin Mary as a highest level veneration, which a lot of the Germans who had the most beautiful women in the entire world didn't like. You see, big thing. Germans, Swedes, Stockholm, and Prussia. You can kind of see with the most beautiful women in the world, coming from that old stock nationalism that's now been intermingled to an extremely high degree, and they were probably always trying to prevent intermingling in Christendom in that general area. They didn't like Marianism that much. That's why you get a lot of the more advanced forms of Protestantism after the major Reformation. So, the lords and ladies of the aristocracy and the judges of the court absorbed the honorifics. of the church. And America did away with them entirely in protest. And that's why in the American English lexicon, you get next to no honorifics except for yes, sir, yes, ma'am, which mostly derived off of military culture, really. There's a yes'm, stuff like that. That's more of a respect for mama, thing. In American culture, if mama ain't happy, nobody's happy. A little American thing there. If you live next to the Amish, you live in a good part of America. It's like one of the those species of plant or animal that denote healthy soil, like certain fungi, ferns, or lichen. I was talking about this earlier in the episode. It's like, yeah, the Amish are one of the most amazing things that humanity has produced, and they live perfectly balanced with the land, and they're extremely productive. And yes, they have a problem with inbreeding, and that's an issue. It will always be an issue with. The more conservative you get, the more problems you'll get with inbreeding. It's a big thing with Japanese society and their incredibly conservative mindset. But you can also see through Japanese society that inbreeding isn't the end of the world. Not saying it's venerable. Like, it might be the end of the world for some people in the Middle East, you know what I'm saying? Because the Arabs have some of the worst inbreeding problems ever. The Pakistanis have some of the worst inbreeding problems ever. The Jewish people have really bad inbreeding problems in some particular cloistered areas, but it's not the end of the world, and people can get over it. I think so. That's one of the big pushes for CRISPR technology. It's trying to rearrange those things so that the inbreeding doesn't cause so many issues. But the Amish would never sign on to it. You see, so it's a hard needle to thread, and people gotta work very hard to thread that needle. And I feel like the more venerated the Amish get for being truly conservative and truly Christian, truly Protestant, while holding up many of the traditions of Catholicism, I think that's a good start. Manatees are peak chumboid. But I gotta say, walruses are pretty cool too. Hippos kind of suck. Hippos kind of suck. That's the reason why people don't like anything but pygmy hippos, right? Hippos kind of suck. I'm not a fan of hippos. I've never been a fan of hippos. Whenever I see a hippo, I'm just like, ugh. And if you look at a hippo underneath they're like pure muscle. So they're designed to literally like pop up out of the bog and eat you. And they will eat people. They're actually some of the most deadly animals on the planet. Hippos, more deadly than sharks. And they'll go after you more than sharks too. Although bull sharks will mess you up, and tiger sharks will mess you up. And if I remember correctly, both of them can swim from saltwater to freshwater. Bull sharks are crazy. But I've also, since the last 4 or 5 years and all the degenerates flooding into my state, I've watched like a bear and shark holocaust. I've watched regular people, thousands and thousands of people, but regular people involved in my area, just normal, run-of-the-mill scumbags coming into the state, killing the hell out of baby sharks, killing the hell out of bears, and it's the fear of pseudo-masculinity and the evils of what we have going on here, for lack of better, concise individual words, is not to be understated. I'm not overstating it, really, truly. And it's really bad in my particular area because I do live right next to Space Force, SpaceX, Kennedy Space Center, which used to be Kennedy Air Force Center. Anyways, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad around here. Weather's nice. The weather's nice. That's why particularly weak people with enough money to fit in have been coming here. We came here to help my military veteran, World War II veteran grandfather die with dignity and have some help. That's why my family came here, and we just stayed around, locked in a good mortgage, have things set up for the future, Big ups to my mom. My mom really cares. My mom's a real one. My mom has been an absolute ray of light recently. She's been absolutely fantastic, motivational, hardworking, inspiring. I love her dearly. And, it sucks when you see it hurting people that you love. This evil culture around, this annoying, destructive, self-centered, small-minded, instant gratification culture that is beyond just the simplicity of instant gratification, but has wandered into kicking the dog territory, kicking the stray dog territory. That's what I'm seeing in my own backyard, and it's pretty bad. I've never in my life seen dead kittens on the road before. Very rarely do I see a dead puppy. Ever. But recently, dead possums, dead kittens, dead puppies, dead dogs, dead raccoons, dead squirrels, and 3 or 4 times more than normal. So there's a combination of the DeSantis government allowing just a tremendous amount of clear cutting and destruction of forests and razing of areas with destruction equipment like bulldozers. And that pushes them out of their area. But you also have the exact sort of people that deliberately target animals. I've never in my life expected to see a dead kitten on the road, like I did in one of the very, very at the historic district where there's a bunch of lights and people can stop. People just won't stop. You know, people would stop back in the day, and they're just not stopping these days. And that's the sickness of the Sonic the Hedgehog sort of mentality of driving. And as I've gone into multiple times, the people that have to drive as fast as possible do not have control over their emotions. They're sick in the head people. And I'm not trying to make people upset, but like, it's bad. It's gotten bad. And you know, some of the worst people sell dogs and race cars. They literally some of the worst people selling super inbred bulldogs. Doesn't matter what color you are, you know, it's the culture. It's that same hustler culture. And like with Andrew Tate coming into the state, there's not a better punctuation mark for the issues that we're facing. I think I finally blinked away the rocket launch. That was pretty cool. The entire sky lit up, and then there's this thing like this big ascending into the sky. Pretty neat, gotta say. You ain't seen one before. I don't know if you've lived, because it's an audio-visual experience. Like, the ground shakes, and everything is very, very loud at the moment of, but it doesn't sound bad. You know, like rice rockets that people inspire them to sound like mosquitoes because they're sick in the head, and that's why you'll never have a super bike, my dude. You're riding a piece of plastic, and it's a rice rocket. Okay, they belong in Indonesia and Malaysia, if that. I wouldn't say they belong anywhere, but that's where they've been a majority of the time, because that's a place with tons and tons of mosquitoes and stuff like that. Now, it's interesting how that works. I don't dislike gigantic, crappy trucks as much as rice rockets, although I do dislike that. But see, the dirtiest looking 3500 Ram that I've ever seen in my entire life, with the dirtiest, nastiest, like, murderer's boat hauling behind it, struggling. It's just like, all right, man, you do you. I see rice rockets zipping and zooming and trying to make as much sound as possible and weaving through traffic. That pisses me off. That makes me want to do Minecraft things. Not that I'm gonna. Not worth it. Eventually, it's got to get legislated. You know, they only unlegislated the noise ordinances back in 2011. So it's eventually going to get legislated that people are going to have to chill out. The degree to which that will help real estate agents will lower compared to the amount of established people that'll move into a particular area. But ultimately, they can just say, hey, you're disturbing the peace. You can do whatever you want, depending on the richness of the area you see. That's what I've already seen manifest in my state. So if you see that popping up in your backyard, that's actually the first warning sign. That's the canary in the coal mine, that your area is going to go really downhill. If you see people making a ton of noise on rice rockets and modifying their exhaust systems on their vehicle, that's the first sign. That's the canary in the coal mine. And I'm not talking about old NASCAR and stuff like that. You know what I mean. The special exhaust systems made in Mexico with the knowledge of Aztec death whistles. The rice rockets. That's a big key. That's a big sign. And like I've heard Sam Hyde, who's a huge fan of motorcycles and muscle cars and stuff like that, say, like, you straight up got to strangle some of these motorcycles to make them not sound like ass. Regardless, let's move on. Let's move on. The only real hope for preserving America is that people are armed and willing to protect the innocent and vulnerable people and animals under their care. Shed a tear for the deportees if you have to. I certainly don't feel happy about it like some people do. But we have real battles to fight on our own home turf to prevent the artificial scarcity of water. There's not a single native plant or animal that doesn't go towards the overall health of your backyard, that doesn't replenish the area in one way or another, excuse me. When one starts to unravel due to wanton troglodytic destruction, others are fast behind. You best believe. You have to be on guard for these things. It's the most important thing. If you care about your children and your grandchildren not inheriting this shifting baseline world where things are worse and worse and worse, the Walmart parking lotification of all their enrichment areas to the point where they are, like, their enrichment involves a very high percentage chance of becoming permanently disabled and being shocked full of pain for the rest of their lives. And all because what? All because you're not accomplishing anything of worth, and you have to push it to a higher level until you eventually flip on your ATV or your dirt bike or something like that. We've all seen it. We've all heard about it. We've all heard the regrets. And yet it's being venerated to a high position by people like Andrew Tate. Because those people are funded by people who want to unravel and destroy society. Straight up. And it's very disappointing. It's very disappointing. I'll drop that. That's enough of that. I'm really rambling this episode. It's probably going to be like 30 minutes and only like 12 minutes of stuff. You see, I said I was going to tighten up a bit, but like eating poorly, I can't tighten up as well. So once Lent starts this Wednesday, I'm getting back up on that horse. Lots of exercise, lots of study, lots of good work. I was really exhausted, and combined that with eating something that made me very sick. It kind of got me off the ball, and then there was the feasts, and then it's just like, choo! Fatter than I've been in a couple of years. All right, so Monster Hunter glorifies poaching, which is disgusting, but I will say the crafting system is peak. Really fun general stories. And if you go to the more recent ones, like the new one that came out, it does venerate environmental protection. It does venerate the killing of invasive species in order to protect and preserve necessary ecosystem. You go back to the older Monster Hunters, like the ones that I like, where the end boss is in the water and stuff. That's my favorite one excuse me, not my favorite one. That's the only one I played back in the day. That was just straight up poaching. There wasn't any deeper lesson in that one. It's just kill monster, hunt monster, kill monster. Lots of running. Now, I have respect for Hunter S. Thompson after reading him for years, but sometimes Gonzo just means retarded. Just straight up. At least in the modern lexicon, sometimes Gonzo just means retarded. I had a rough childhood, and when I befriended a whale at SeaWorld, I realized him back to the wild. Cops were pretty pissed at me, but I saved myself by saving the whale. Oh, pizza. There are bad people everywhere, right? But I haven't been joking about them being magnetized to DeSantis' Florida, whether or not that was DeSantis' original goal or not. Personally, I can't help but think that he knew. And then just as he knew that he was doing bad when he was being the good cop in the torture dungeons in Guantanamo Bay to hurt people even more by sweetening up the conversation and then cracking down on anything that he learned in very disgusting ways. Not in ways that you would need to do in order to get military intelligence, but in just pure sadistic ways. I can't help but think that he knew what he was doing. He just doesn't care. And, I have not been insincere when I would call Andrew Tate a groomer. So, really, before he got brought to the United States, I was calling him a groomer on the show because he is a groomer. Nor am I joking about how bad Dodge has gotten after being the #1 recipient of military contractor and police welfare. It's bad. It's a bad company. And, howdy on one point, just because an NGO has America in its name does not mean it's not an NGO. Libertarians. Alright, Joe. Sloppy episode, but got a lot covered. So, cheers.